In the era of low inventory and moderately high rates, a lot of homeowners in Princeton and the surrounding towns are choosing to renovate instead of move. And the projects are just getting bigger and bigger and not unsurprisingly more expensive. So today we're sitting down with Tom Pinneo of Pinneo Construction, and Tom's firm works on incredibly high-end renovations and custom homes throughout the Princeton market, inclusive of Hopewell, etc. And we're going to break down exactly what's happening in that market right now and what a homeowner should know before they start a renovation. So welcome back to the Wilton Report. I'm Josh Wilton, and I co-own and run the #1 boutique real estate company here in Central New Jersey. I've helped thousands of people buy and sell real estate, which has given me a front row seat to help you make smarter decisions. So welcome to Tom Pinneo. Hey, Tom.
Josh, good to be with you.
Thanks for coming on the Wilton Report. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So why don't we start with a little bit of background about yourself? Like, how did you guys, meaning how did you specifically get into construction and then into luxury construction?
Yeah, it was not a foregone conclusion. Let's put it that way. So yeah, proud Princeton High School graduate, class of 1983, went off college, graduate school, and pretty quickly realized that I was better off making things than writing long papers and all of that stuff. So Pinneo Construction was born in 1996 after I'd worked for some other builders locally and across the country. And yeah, it started out with, like many general contractors probably start out, where it was me and a pickup truck and a bunch of tools. And then, yeah, that was 30 years ago, Josh. So that was, Clinton had just, been reelected for a second term. You were probably dancing the Macarena, and which I know you still very well.
Officially, I will neither confirm nor deny that I've ever danced the Macarena.
Just like President Clinton. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. And and 30 years later, through strong collaborations with architects and homeowners in Princeton, we've managed to pull off a lot of really great projects. And I mean that in terms of the collaboration, but it's not us, it's in collaboration with really good architects and willing clients that we've managed a portfolio from very historic to ultra modern. So it's been a process, but we've built a company that I don't think I would have imagined when I was bouncing around my F-250.
So let's look back at the Tom from 30 years ago, right? And there's another version of you out there in any industry. It could be real estate, it could be construction, it could be electrical, plumbing. When I talk to local business owners, I always ask them, like, what advice would you give to that young aspiring entrepreneur?
Yeah, there's a book called, I think it's The Entrepreneurial Seizure or something like that. So it's where the carpenter decides to put out a sign and be a general contractor. It's where the doctor, who's a great clinician, starts to practice. And what I would say is that's an important part of what you do, but at the end of the day, it's only a small part of what you do. So it's building process, really. And I think that's one of the things, along with my partner, Chris Myers, that I'm most proud of, is that we have a process to get from a first call, hi, Tom, we've got some plans, we're interested in this addition or this new home, to a punch list. So, it's something we followed for a long time. We're constantly improving on how we do that, but it's really just about a process to get from start to finish. So I would say it's all of the systems and the processes. That's the advice I would give to that
Young entrepreneur.
That young entrepreneur wants to start a business. Take that passion, but back it up with all sorts of systems and processes.
If I may, there's a great book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. It's like
that. I think that might be it.
Self-employment Bible, right?
Yeah, The E-Myth.
So, all right, let's talk about Pinneo. So you guys have such an amazing reputation in town. And, your projects are different in that you're not a normal builder, meaning you're not buying land and building houses and selling them. You're working specifically for people who already own property. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement. That's correct. And I think the other important piece of it is that like 98.5% of what we do is architect design. So, that's maybe the first filter through which we look at a project. Does it come with an architect or a designer? Okay. Yeah, we'll go back and do something small for a past client who has a designer and we've gotten to know them and so on and so forth. And that's just who we are. There are lots of good firms locally who will do smaller projects, but we've just, for how we're set up, really the filter probably, Josh, is best. Just that if there's an architect involved, we're probably interested.
Okay. So if I'm a homeowner and I'm looking at the scope of my renovation,
Yep.
like you guys can handle from what low price to what high-end price?
Yeah. So I would say that just kind of for us, kind of as I look at what's in the pipeline right now, a smaller project would be a kitchen renovation that has that mudroom addition, right? That's very common, right? For 30 years, we've been doing that, and that has unchanged. Whatever other trends there are, kitchen more kind of that drop zone, the mudroom, whatever you call it, that's on the smaller end. To on the upper end, the larger scale, of course, just new home. So, and everything in between. And that is one of the things that gets me up in the morning is that I really don't know what that next thing is going to be. And it could be from very modern architect, something on Lake Drive, lots of glass and concrete, exposed concrete, to renovation of a 18th century home in Mercer Hill, something like that. So,
right. So let's talk about some of the things that make Pinneo unique. And you guys work with very specific, and I won't even call them, contractors, I'll say craftsmen for your cabinets, for your woodworking, for all of that stuff. Like if you could say to a homeowner who's thinking, you know what, I have to do a pretty big renovation on my house. I'm not going to move. I have the right lot size. I'm just going to invest the capital, right? What's the Pinneo difference?
So there are three things: transparency into costs, process, as I mentioned, how to get from that first call to a punch list, and collaboration. So wherever you are in your development of the project, whether you have an architect or don't, I can recommend one. But we love 2 out of 3 of our projects, maybe 3 out of 4 of our projects are ones where client comes to us with our architect, an initial set of plans, and they say, okay, can we just get in the right zip code? What I sometimes call, should we continue the conversation level of pricing? At which point we'll pull together some comps and show maybe a recent project and say, here are the plans, here's the cost. Yes, there are these differences, but I think we're kind of in this range. Okay, or no, gosh, we were expecting half of that. We're going to go back and rethink this, or great, let's move forward. Let's figure out how to value engineer that. At which point we start taking a look at it, as you just said. Should we use one of our several custom cabinet shops who, it turns out, aren't a whole lot more expensive than what you can get from a lumber yard, and you can get it exactly the way you want it. So that's when we just sort of let loose and start looking at, get under the hood and look at all aspects of the project. So
from the perspective of, let's pretend I'm a homeowner, right? I'm like, Tom, I'm going to do that kitchen mudroom combination renovation. Beginning to end, what's a rough timeline for a project like that?
6 months. Plus or minus, depending on how gnarly that is, what the demolition is like, how clean that addition is, and whether we have to set you up with another, temporary kitchen in the house.
You guys do that?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's not going to have, we're not going to put new subway tile in your living room and then take it back off. But, we often actually repurpose the old kitchen in some part. We've done a little bit, like sometimes we'll just quickly replumb something, have exposed piping, but that's where someone can make the calculus. Should I move out? That cost, it'll probably take us a little longer if you're in the house, and it's not a lot of fun. I mean, the bloom falls off the rose pretty quickly. The enthusiasm of, wow, look at all this excitement. And then it turns into, really? When are we going to get done?
When you cook on a hot plate a few days in a row, it gets a little older.
Yeah, we've done that too. We put a nice hot plate on someone's deck. We had a pop up, and she's Italian. She made a fresh hot lunch for her kids every morning on the back deck. Let me see more about her than us. But, and 6 months means that, again, this isn't just a quick kitchen refresh. There is structural work. There's a foundation, there's extensive work, because again, if it's not, it probably just isn't a project we're doing. That's not to say don't do that project. It's just that people are calling us when there is kind of that level, that threshold of intervention, let's put it.
So it's interesting. In Princeton, in the standing inventory, and there's not a lot of inventory, as everybody knows, the standing inventory, almost 60% of it's now above $2 million, right? The homes that are for sale. And I did a podcast or a broadcast the other day, and I said the the era of the single family house in Princeton under $1 million is more or less gone, right? And so you do have a lot of higher end homes now in Princeton. When in your experience, and I'm asking from a real estate hat, do people say, should I check that I'm going to get my money out of this? Or they just say, I don't care, let's just do it?
No, most people are doing that calculation either explicitly or implicitly. Yeah. I mean, that said, when the emotions start heating up and you see the renderings of the kitchen, when push comes to shove, we often see people saying, all right, we're in this far. I don't know if I'm going to get my money back on that particular countertop, and those are good bets, right? I mean, you tell me. I mean, maybe I should be spending more time checking with you, Josh, when people ask that question. But I mean, you've seen plenty of before and afters with some of these typical kind of renovations, the updated kitchen and the much more utilitarian, not just for looks, but much more utilitarian and well-functioning, well-designed, sharp-looking space.
So let's talk about that. So let's go down the gamut. If you had to say, okay, the number one countertop surface your clients are buying today is what?
Yeah, it's still granite.
I would have bet quartz or marble, actually.
Fair enough. Yes, I put that in I was afraid you were going to ask me these sort of design question. And what I would say is, again, I see so much across very sleek, very modern, almost, very spare to kind of more of the grants and the quartzites. I would say what's trendy in Princeton is not being trendy, if you know what I mean. Yes, we have done our fair share of the modern farmhouse, which I think is tailing off.
Okay.
Plenty of the nickel gap siding, whether it's interior or exterior, but cabinet styles or countertops, I guess, again, I'm responding to the unique and really very good architects who have their own visions and are probably not spending a lot of time checking what's going on in the rest of the world. Not to say our clients aren't, but I don't have.
So you're really getting, a spec sheet from the homeowner and the architect, and is it fair to say like you just thrive on the process of execution?
I think what we are, I sometimes, we're not a design build firm. We're not architects. We don't have architects on staff. We are good partners in the design intent. So that can, with that initial kind of understanding, we can suggest details and we can certainly suggest certain materials, but that is not where we are mainly injecting, kind of the value add. Again, why people are hiring us. They're hiring us for the process. More and more people are interested. I think we've developed a bit of a reputation around really trying to be thoughtful and effective around building performance. So energy usage and thermal comfort. And
Are you seeing a lot of that right now? Obviously with the world, what it is, it's, energy's back in vogue and, being conservative energy. So is that something that you're seeing? Like, what are your customers doing today that they weren't doing 10 years ago in terms of being energy efficient?
Paying more attention simply to the enclosure, the building enclosure. So obviously if we're doing a mudroom addition, all right, that's a small component, right? That doesn't really come up. Whole house renovations where we're gutting the whole house, and maybe doing residing it as well, or certainly no new home construction. We're really trying to be thinking about the whole building performance, not as an afterthought, but during the construction, because that might impact the thickness of the walls or what goes in the walls or the windows, the HVAC systems. As you go around, we're seeing a lot more heat pumps, right? There was a time not that long ago where people said we're too cold a climate for heat pumps. That is just flat out not the case anymore. Anybody tells you that, I say thank you very much and move on to the next person. Our basic premise is where we can, we want to lower the demand, lower the load on this building, and then meet that with efficient mechanical systems and obvious things like LED lighting, Spray foam has been around for, decades. We are fine with it. We certainly use it in a lot of roofs. There are a lot of better ways to, we think, insulate a wall, and we promote that, whether it's exterior insulation in conjunction with mineral wool or something like that or dense packed cellulose in the wall cavities. Anyway, we can get more into that if we want, but that's of particular interest. And I think that's something that we do well and try to integrate into the design, even if it's not something that clients are coming to us with at the top of their list of priorities.
Yeah. Have you seen an impact, Tom, since COVID? Really, obviously, we've been in an incredibly low inventory environment, right? And have you seen people just going, forget, I'm not moving. I'm just staying put. Tom, have you seen or experienced that?
We certainly had the wave of people moving to Princeton in COVID. We're still experiencing people moving here and buying wherever they can. I don't have to tell you, there isn't low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit has been picked, right? But nevertheless, we see people willing to come and do what's needed to have the house that they want. Yeah, maybe a bit, though, to answer your question specifically, that people are saying, I'm not going to move given the financials right now. So yeah, but what I see there are people doing kind of maybe the kitchen thing, right? We know that this would be a good thing to do anyway. It may not be the place we want to live forever, but whoever either will enjoy the kitchen for the next few years, or whoever buys it will have an updated kitchen. So,
and how about the ADU phenomenon in Princeton? Have you guys experienced any requests for ADUs?
Definitely. They've usually been, of late, they are in conjunction with another project. So a big renovation or a new home we're building, just completing on Cherry Hill Road right now, has an ADU above the garage. It took a little bit longer. I think I was expecting the, floodgates to open, but, I think a bit of leveling in terms of the expectations of what that might cost and making it work zoning wise. But when it works, boy, does it work.
Yeah, no, zoning is an interesting thing with the ADU business. So yeah, let's talk about trendy in Princeton is not to be trendy. You had alluded to that earlier. What did you mean by that? What needle is the consumer looking to thread in Princeton with their renovation?
Look, honestly, I just think most of Pinneo Construction's clients are coming with their architect, maybe a designer, and they are pretty sure that they know what they want within certain sort of parameters. And I think the thing that we offer is a transparency into that pricing so that when we sit down for initial budget, they understand where that money is going. And they may say, all right, we're not going to do the custom cabinetry in the laundry room. We'll stick with the custom cabinetry because it's actually not that much more expensive in the kitchen. We'll use something else in the laundry room as an example. So I go back to this thing that I don't see sweeping trends. Okay, yes, the ADU, we're seeing more of that. When that's possible, people are thinking about that. But as far as what's trending on Houzz or something like that, or Pinterest or somebody's Instagram, I don't really see that because it's come through this filter of an architect by the time it's gotten to us, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. But what if somebody calls you up and says, Tom, I want to do this, that, and the other in my house. And you go, great. Do you have an architect? And they say, no. How do you handle that?
It is tempting. Yes.
A lot of businesses do not stay in what makes them a sweet spot, right? They go, yeah. And they make exceptions to their process, or they make exceptions to their staffing, and then they tend to go squiffy.
I would say this, there's a little bit of a growth or exploration edge for us, and that would be more of the kitchen and bath renovation that does not have a great structural component to it. So one of the custom shops that we work with has a very good kitchen designer, and we've also, through them, latched on to someone who is an interior designer who will work just basically on a fee-only basis. So it's a good mesh with who we are and what we provide, what we bring. They can be kind of a consultant, but we're not turning to them to supply light fixtures, tile, or cabinets or something like that. So that's worked for us. So the answer might be either one of two things. We're probably not the right fit, or, hey, if it's a sizable kitchen refresh, we can look at that. And I would put you in touch with a kitchen designer at one of our custom cabinet shops.
Right.
So
right.
You said, what advice would I give a young entrepreneur? What advice would I give to a homeowner?
Oh, it's funny, Tom. That was my next question.
Well, see, that's, apart from kind of wearing the same plaid, I knew we were on to something here. So I would say do not underestimate the value of kind of the pre-planning. So one of the questions I get often in an initial kind of call is, when can you start? And I say, well, I like starting, but I like finishing more. And the enthusiasm, we need to be both enthusiastic starters and committed finishers. And one of the very best ways to stay on budget, stay on schedule, and stay friends during the renovation is to have a clear scope of work and have that reflected in the contract documents, have it clear in the estimate, who's providing what those things are. And then on a weekly basis, check in on those, what's changing. Our golden rule is that we don't start any additional work, anything outside a scope of work without a signed approval, right? And so back to that process, right? So I would say the advice to the homeowner is front load the project. Your enthusiasm to get started is understandable, but the dividends that you get from planning, dialing things in at the outset are many times greater return than not paying for a proper plan, a design, and getting things teed up properly.
And knowing you the way I do, I know you guys invest a lot of time and energy in the beginning. Well, I mean, throughout the project, but I think you're not so much in a rush to sign up people as you are to explain the process. And I'll be honest, like in our business, working with consumers, it is SOP for us to have that meeting up front. This is the process. This is what we do. And these are our mutual expectations. This is what happens when you go to like that initial meeting in business, I think is, regardless of the business, is super critical.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And again, it's easy to get carried away with the enthusiasm around the build, like these pictures. Let me show you what I want. Okay. And obviously when I'm wearing my salesman hat, I share that enthusiasm and it's sincere, right? It's exciting to sit down and look at what's on paper and look at this existing house and go, this transformation is about to take place. But you do need to sort of bring people down to all right, this is going to be, it's going to be 6 months or it's going to be 14 months.
You're going to be cooking lunch on the deck on a hot plate.
Yeah, let's be very clear. Let's not pussyfoot around this,
Right.
Yeah. So, and as you know, one of my detours in life was studying Chinese in college and graduate school. And I often quote, or I paraphrase, Chairman Mao said, revolution is not a dinner party. And I've often said renovation is not a dinner party, by which he means blood will be spilled, right?
Chairman Tom.
Chairman Tom.
That's your new name.
That is, call me the chairman. Yeah.
Chairman Tom.
But you're right. And then, the thing that and you may lose some projects because of that, right? And we are about to start a project with clients who about 18 months ago came to us. We were in a pool of contractors. They were interviewing, great mesh. And we said when we could actually start. And others said they could start earlier. That didn't work out for everybody else. And we are now in permits on this project because they said, look, among other reasons that you have to be sincere and you're going to, as I said, you may lose some projects, but reputation gets around that you guys and have we had projects that have run over? Of course. So, because of us, absolutely. But we do the best we can to say, realistically, here's when this can start. We put a realistic schedule together and you go, somebody else is likely saying something a little bit rosier. And, that's just a lesson. And several gray hairs later where our production team has said, Tom, do this. We've got to make what you've just promised. Right. And so I've learned the hard way not to and it's not because I'm trying to be deceiving anyone, but optimistic, right? So let's keep our feet planted. All of that said, right? It's a lot of upfront time, like you were talking about, and put together a plan, show the milestones, stay on track. And at the end of the day, that's what people are going to remember.
So you, in addition to running a very busy company, right? You are actually involved in, I'll say the word local charities. And Yeah, some of them are housing related. Do you want to spend a minute and talk about what you were involved in on a housing basis in Princeton?
Yeah, yeah. So I am wrapping up my third and final year as chair of the housing initiatives of Princeton. So Pinneo Construction on our 25th anniversary 5 years ago, a moment of reflection, thinking about what we had done and what I hope to be doing for the next X number of years. And, you were just talking about the cost of housing in Princeton. And I think it would be disingenuous if I didn't say that, we have been complicit in making Princeton a less affordable place. I mean, okay, a small cog in that, but renovations, additions, and costs and costs and costs, right? I am tremendously proud of that body of work. But I thought, what else instead of, but what else can we be doing? What else should we be thinking about? And so I was in touch with someone who I knew was part of some housing thing, and I didn't really know what it was. And quickly we got on a call, and then I was introduced to the board. And so Housing Initiatives of Princeton is a 25-year-old nonprofit. Legend has it, it was started at one of the houses of worship in Princeton when it was discovered that someone was sleeping in the church. And we do two things primarily. We own or rent and operate 9 houses in Princeton, serving typically a single mom and a couple of children. And this is through what we call our transitional housing program. So we provide safe, stable, and secure housing typically for 2 years. While we are transitioned from housing insecurity to typically long-term affordable housing. People come into the program. They have a safe, stable, and secure place to live for 2 years. We connect them with a housing navigator who helps to get them through the process. The absolutely it's convoluted and just excruciating process of getting through the affordable housing lottery. We connect them. We have dedicated social workers, case managers, financial counselors. We connect them with volunteers who help boost their resumes. And so we hope to help build sustainable futures through housing, right? It is amazing, right?
Like society at large wants everybody to get better. I think everybody overlooks the housing component because I spend time and donate to the rescue mission of Trenton, and they deal with people who are homeless and in addiction or both, or one or the other. And well, it's great to help somebody get sober and clean. And that is, God's work on this earth. However, guess what they need next? They need a place to live. And that's a big part of their mission too, right? It's like a lot of these charities, I think, have gone beyond just helping people like, all right, let's get them on their feet, but let's house them. Let's get them stable. And let's ground them, and then we can take the next steps.
How can you be thinking about all of those higher order things if you're like with your kid, either, maybe couch surfing and just not really sure maybe you know where tonight is, but maybe you don't know where you're going to be next week or whatever it is, right? So it is all of the things I described, plus an opportunity just sort of to lower the temperature, it reduce that just kind of ambient anxiety, and to then work on these other things, whether it's your credit score, job, could be substance abuse, but do it knowing that for the next 2 years, there is roughly, right? And it sort of depends on the timing around getting into a long-term affordable unit. So we do that. We also provide what we call eviction prevention. We used to call it rental assistance. And, so we provide, in conjunction with our other housing stability coalition partners, we provide back rent, security deposits. That's the program that Princeton cited when they gave us a nice big 3-year grant. So yeah, very immediate. And, this to me is sort of the both and, right? We live in a place where you've just quoted where we are kind of on single family housing prices. And, and there is housing instability in Princeton. If that wasn't clear to anyone, let me just say it right here and now. That is the case, right? So we're both a very affluent community, of course, but we're also a community in need. And there are more people who are living a tenuous existence than a lot of people see. So
yeah, I know when, the Princeton Mobile Food Pantry started, it was, a small operation. They have an entire building on Harrison Street, right? And that they don't leave Princeton. Like they're dealing with Princeton residents who not only have housing insecurity, but food insecurity. So it is amazing that you're involved in that on top of everything else you do. So how can people find out, first and foremost, about Pinneo Construction? Where do they go to contact you guys?
You can go to the PinneoConstruction.com and just click on the info. If you want to send an email, you can email me just at tom@PinneoConstruction.com or
PinneoConstruction.com.
yeah, PinneoConstruction.com. That's the best place.
How about the housing initiatives? Where can people find out about that?
Yes, housinginitiatives.org. That's how they can learn more there. I'd love it if people wanted to sign up for that newsletter and come to one of our events. May 3rd, we'll have Princeton University Professor Catherine Eden speaking at our spring event and our annual, what we call the rent party, which is the throwback to the days when people would throw kind of a block party and help raise rent for neighbors. And that's in October. All the information is on the Housing Initiatives of Princeton.
Excellent. Okay. Well, Tom, thank you for coming in and taking time from your, I know, to be very busy schedule. I appreciate your expertise and your insight. And for those of you who are just tuning in, that was Tom Pinneo. He's the co-owner or owner of Pinneo Construction, and you can find him at PinneoConstruction.com. And if you haven't hit subscribe, please do so. We're here every week chatting about all things real estate related. This week, have a little bit of a different take. So, Tom, thank you for your expertise. I'm Josh Wilton, and this is the Wilton Report.